Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon. I know that sessions towards the end of the day, and especially after lunch, can get trying, but it seems like there's really great energy in the room here today, so we're happy to be in company with you all. So some of you have likely noticed I am not actually Patricia Hernandez, who was supposed to be moderating this panel originally. Patricia really wanted to be here today and is unfortunately out sick and asked me to step in. So my name is Lauren Velez. I'm the Associate Director of New York at CSH, or the Corporation for Supportive Housing, on the Metro team with Patricia. For anyone not familiar, CSH is a national nonprofit that works with communities across the country to further supportive housing as a solution to homelessness through lending, technical assistance, and training, and some advocacy and policy work as well. CSH has been working in the aging space over the last 3 years throughout New York City to really examine how we can better serve older adults who are in need of or currently in supportive housing. Most people report that they do want to age in place or in the community or unit of their choosing, and we know that this is becoming increasingly more difficult to coordinate and accommodate for the population that we work with. Last year, with support from the Samuels Foundation, CSH worked with a cohort of 7 different supportive housing agencies who were piloting innovative programming in response to the needs that they were seeing from their older adults in their programs. We learned a lot about the needs that are presenting with folks as they age, and we learned a lot about, how programs are trying to, have innovative collaborations and innovative programmings and things like that they can come together to meet the needs of folks with. We also created a Making the Case document for greater investment in supportive services for older adults. And this year, CSH is collaborating with the Association for Community Living, or ACL, and we recently launched an Aging Academy. So this is a 6-session series focused on helping providers understand and anticipate the needs of their aging residents, learn about the different evidence-based practices that are being employed for this population, think about things like service and benefits navigation, supporting the staff that does this work, and more. All 6 sessions will be available online, so feel free to see me after this session if you're interested about learning more. So a little bit more to set the foundation for our conversation today. Based on a recent needs assessment, we know that in New York State alone, there are around 65,000 people who are really in need of supportive housing, and that's probably a conservative number. And about 1/3 of that population is older adults, so it's a pretty significant chunk. We know that folks who have comorbidities, like we often see in the supportive housing population, they tend to see the adverse effects of aging happening earlier than their peers. And for folks who have experienced homelessness or living outside, we know that they tend to see the signs of aging showing up about 20 years prematurely, so it's pretty significant. Given that many programs and resources for older adults are not able to meet the needs of folks with severe trauma or who are presenting with co- or trimorbidities, coupled with the fact that many of the older adults we are serving are really in need of interventions before they're chronologically or age-wise eligible, we're often left in really challenging situations when it comes to supporting folks remaining in their homes of choice. So what do we do? We need to look at ways that we can bridge the gap between housing, healthcare, and supportive services. We've got to look at the economic factors that are contributing to this and think proactively about how we can help older adults avoid homelessness in the first place and keep them as stably housed as possible. And we need to keep in mind that the needs of the folks that we care so much about and are serving as they age, we have to recognize that traditional aging services are probably not targeting our demographic in the same way that we are, right? So aging services are very vast. They're often meant for, a whole spectrum of folks, but they're not specifically targeted for this complex population. And they're often not equipped to meet the needs of the population, right? So we're going to hear from 3 really amazing organizations today, and we'll hear from The Bridge first, and then we'll hear from SelfHelp and Breaking Ground about some of the innovative ways that they're providing services to this population. We will have time for questions after the presentation, so look forward to learning with you all today. Yeah. I'll hand it off to Yuliel.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is having a good day. I'm glad to see the room is filled. So I'm just going to briefly introduce myself, and we'll all do the same. My name is Yuliel Blanco, and I am the program director for the home program at the Bridge. And I will pass it right on over.
Thank you. My name is Mohini. I'm the vice president at SelfHelp Community Services. I oversee social services.
Hi, my name is John Betts. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Assistant Vice President of Program Development and Innovation at Breaking Ground, so I work on new program startup, proposal development, and service model development across our portfolio.
All right, thank you all. And we're going to start hearing from the Bridge.
So let's jump right in. So over at the Bridge, we are using an evidence-based therapy that is how we address and help individuals that are currently struggling with hoarding. And the program is called the HOME program. It is an acronym that we created. The acronym stands for Helping Organize My Environment. I do want to start with just by saying, when I came on to the program, it was about a year ago, and the program was still in its inception. So at that time, that just meant that we were creating forms of data collection and new assessments, which just better helped us tailor everything to the Bridge and the tenants that are at the Bridge. The home program is only currently available for Bridge residential tenants at this time. So unfortunately, I guess the bigger goal is for us to bring about more awareness and continue to partner with more people. But right now, the Bridge was able to bring the home program to fruition thanks to our partnerships with Dr. Catherine Ayers of UCSD. She's the person that developed the CREST therapy that we use in the home program, and also through generous funding that we established through the Fan Fox and Leslie R. Samuels Foundation. And so we are very grateful because due to this, we are able to continue assisting tenants within the Bridge. So one big aspect that we have in the home program is the CREST therapy. It is an acronym. This acronym stands for Cognitive Rehabilitation Exposure Sorting Therapy. This is a therapy that helps us address hoarding through different techniques and exercises. It is done through 26 sessions that are essentially, the therapy is divided into two parts. We have first part, which is cognitive training, and then we have a second portion, which is the behavioral exposure. Cognitive training assists tenants struggling with executive functioning, and behavioral exposure helps us assist clients that want that are experiencing distress with discarding and acquiring. So it helps us try to tackle it from two different angles. And we obviously try to meet tenants where they're at, depending on how they present. And we use multiple measures to try to gauge where a person should start to receive treatment. One of the big things is we conduct weekly CREST meetings with the CREST team, which is with Dr. Ayers' team over in San Diego. We do this weekly where we are discussing case management and different approaches with tenants. We also meet weekly with her implementation team, and they assist us in data collection and creating assessments also. I think these are really important aspects just because we are able to implement and modify therapy in real time. And so that also assists us with more tailored treatment, which is a big reason as to why I even came on to the Bridge initially, was because I was looking for a company that focused on a person-centered approach and actually utilized it. So, and this is a big aspect for CREST and us trying to tailor treatment for clients. So another big thing that we have over at the bridge is, we also, not only do we partner with Dr. Ayers and the Samuels Foundation, we also partner with the Jewish Board, and we continue to try to make as many connections as possible with different programs, just because we are in New York City. We do understand that hoarding is a chronic condition, it's a lifelong condition, and it's a small space. We do want to try to address and help as many individuals as possible. The goal would be, however, to get the home program available to everyone, obviously, in the future. So I picked these pictures just to better explain what the home process is kind of like. So this is what we encounter versus what we hope to attain. Right. So on any given day, I may get a referral, and the referrals are usually for rooms or spaces that look as cluttered as the first picture that we have here. And at that point, the goal is for us to engage the client and try to attempt treatment using CREST. And the goal is to get it to the second picture that we have here, where it is completely decluttered, but this is the overarching goal is to utilize CREST to do that, where the tenant feels as though they have the autonomy, they are prepared, and they're stable enough and excited to clear their space within reason. One thing too is we work very closely with multiple teams in order to get this accomplished. But the biggest thing that we use to kind of like go through these units and range what it is that needs to be addressed is we use this measure that is called the SIRS. Last acronym, I promise. So the SIRS stands for the Clutter Image Rating Scale, and this is a measure that we use to range levels of clutter within each unit. And the SIRS consists of 3 pages, it's 3 pages of 9 images that will range clutter, right? So we will start, like a number 1 would be our second picture here, where there's no apparent issue, and then a number 9 would be the second picture here, which is, it's an extreme level of clutter. And this, the bridge also took it upon themselves to create their own studio version of the SIRS, because the SIRS currently only covered bedroom, living room, and kitchen. And so the bridge decided to create the studio version to just better represent supportive housing, which I think is awesome, because it again allows for us to show a clear picture of what is happening. And so, yeah, referrals can come in from anywhere, within the bridge umbrella. It can be staff, it can be a self-referral, it can be from any space. And so the SIRS is a big tool that we use just to kind of stay on the same page. Promise I will keep this super simple. So here we have rates of, these are the average scores of the SIRS that is conducted by different groups. The different groups consist of cleaning compliance, which is a team that the bridge has, that we use, the home program utilizes them in order to assist in large discards whenever a client is prepared for that. And then the second group we have here is we also have staff, because there's staff present in every bridge building, and so staff are also privy to the SIRS. Everyone can use the SIRS or uses the SIRS when they're going into the unit, and so we have the averages of everyone's right here. And I just think it's important to note, because here we can see just kind of like a representation of what is happening. The first set of scores are coming in from staff, and it makes sense, just because I want to address the disparity, it makes sense that their scores are slightly higher than anyone else's, because now if you're staff in a building and you're experiencing, you see a unit and you're seeing it may be getting out of hand, you may want to overscore, or you don't have anything else to compare it to where it's extreme, and so you see clutter and you're like, no, this is an 8 by my standard. And so it makes sense that staff may score a little higher. It's totally understandable. And then the next one underneath would be the one that's conducted by cleaning compliance. So cleaning compliance obviously is going to be more versed in seeing units. They're seeing apartments every single day in every single bridge building, right? So they have a clear picture of what is extreme levels of clutter versus what isn't. And so their scores are going to be slightly lower. But then we also see now, once a client has been assessed by home and by the program, the scores are right in the middle, which make a lot of sense because now you have someone that's just a little bit more informed, taking a look and scoring the situation. And then finally, I just think it's important to know that the lowest scores here are from individuals that are currently in treatment or receiving some sort of engagement. And that's important to note because that means that once there are eyes on a unit, and that means that we can actually help, and help is actually coming because clients are now, whether it's small or large, they are discarding. They do find ways to discard. And so I just wanted to share that just because I do think it's important to note that hoarding is traditionally stigmatized. It is a lifelong condition, but it has been severely stigmatized. But I just think it's one of those things where I am not diagnosed as a hoarder, but I have found myself utilizing Crest, right? Like, it just, because sometimes you won't even realize that you do have a box that you haven't touched in a certain amount of time, and there are items there that you really do not need. And so I just think it's something that we can all share, and we can all, I just think it's important to bring about more awareness in this particular area. So just to try to, just close it up some. So the next slide that I have here is about takeaways and lessons learned. For the SIRS, I think the big thing that we took away is that even with that small disparity, with more psychoeducation and more awareness, the gap will continue to become smaller because, we will continue to be on the exact same page. But we also know that that's not ever always 100% possible. But the idea is to get it as standardized as we can. And the SIRS continues to help us with communication and further engagement and further referrals. Another big lesson that we learned in the home program came about through engagement. So one of the bigger characteristics of individuals that are struggling with hoarding is that they experience high levels of avoidance. This can cause a lapse in engagement. So to counter that, what the Bridge chose to do was we tailored some of these pitches, we reworked the pitches, and then we created an incentive that in its own way has it's kind of like snowballed into more referrals, more engagement. To be specific, the incentive that we do have is a coffee incentive. So we are giving out, it's like a $5 gift card, and clients can go and actually get coffee. Somehow this has turned into the highlight of a lot of these, it's very interesting, and they are using it as a way to socialize, but just also a lot of older adults are staying inside. They're not going out. They're not getting some fresh air. So in a way, it does kind of force them to get up, get out. People have gotten very creative. It is a $5 gift card for coffee, but of course, donuts, and people have found the way. So I think it is very wonderful, and I think that the Bridge is doing great work in trying to counter it. And then another lesson, one of the 2 takeaways that I wanted to leave you guys with before I close up is, so we do have 2 tools that I think anyone can use, regardless of whether or not you're in the home program, part of the Bridge or not. And so in the CREST therapy, we have something that's called a hierarchy. It's a kind of a ranking list that is created with tenants. And essentially, the tenant will rank from most difficult to least difficult in discarding or acquiring. I think this is a good place to begin, kind of like to see where to start with the tenant or a friend or a family member, whoever it is that you see that might be struggling. A hierarchy is a good way to see just where to start beginning to tackle the, for lack of a better term, problem, right? And then finally, rules. We create rules in Crest for tenants who may want to hold themselves accountable on a different level. It assists greatly. But the caveat to that is clients or tenants have to create the rule for themselves. If we create the rule for them, it won't work. They won't be motivated to complete it. And so the rule has to be created by the tenant. A quick example of that would be, let's say you have a lot of boxes in your home and you haven't touched the box in a certain amount of time. One rule that you could create would be, if I haven't touched the box in over a year, it's automatically discarded. That's an extreme rule. But just a quick option where we can just kind of get it really quickly. So yeah, I just really wanted to leave you guys with the hierarchy and the rules, because there's something that anyone can do, and I think it's important for us to share. And I think also, just to finally finish up and close up, we do have provider support groups available. And so, when we're done, if anyone is interested, I will be here and I'll be more than welcome to answer any questions if you guys happen to know anyone that might be interested. But yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Yuliel. Yeah, hoarding is a really challenging thing to sort through with folks. I remember as a case manager, I had a client who had a bag full of old candy wrappers that were like years and years and years old. And, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why this was so important for her to hang on to. And then she told me that it was from the Halloween that she had first gotten her children back after they'd been separated. And that was why she was saving those wrappers. And then it made sense, right?
I think that's the most interesting part, is when we find out why people are storing these items. We all have a story. So.
Yeah. Thanks. Next, I'm excited to hear from Mohini on SelfHelp's trauma-informed model for supporting older adults.
Thank you, Lauren. So I want to give a little background about the organization so that we can understand how we have been doing trauma-informed work since 1936. So SelfHelp is a mission-driven organization that's almost 87 years old, and with the goal of keeping people in the community and being the last surviving relative to the victims of the Holocaust. So trauma work is very ingrained in everything that we do. It started with working with the Holocaust survivors, but then over the years we have brought in all the lessons we have learned in providing trauma-informed care with the survivors to all the other population that we currently work with. We serve more than 25,000 older adults throughout the New York City. We have a wide range of different programs. We have case management programs. We have affordable housing. We have naturally occurring retirement communities, guardianship program, adult protective service program, all with the common thread of providing services with trauma in mind. In 2018, we created a subsidiary called SelfHelp Realty Group. That's what I'm going to talk a little bit about in our affordable housing, with the intentionality of promoting and building more affordable housing. So SelfHelp Active Service for Aging model sits under SelfHelp Realty Group. A little bit about our housing. Demographically, we are very diverse. We serve more than 1,600 diverse older adults. That's what we do. Our housing with services model serves only older adults. So that's the lens that I'm going to talk a little bit about. Our first building was in 1964, and our most recent building just opened in Staten Island with the Empire State Supporting Housing Initiative. Just recently, we have just onboarded 15 folks who are coming from the shelter system. It's a 138 unit building. A background, we are in New York City, so our residents are very diverse. So they come from different parts of the world, they speak different languages. Less than 10% have English as their first language. So our services are very culturally and linguistically appropriate to the older adults that we serve. We like to know what they did before they came into our housing so that we can then connect them to different kinds of volunteering opportunities. So that's why we like to know, were they cooks, were they like painters, were they doctors, were they lawyers, so that then we can kind of create specific interest needs or special interest groups for them, right? Again, with the intentionality of making sure that we bring in their strengths-based approach into their engagement, as I'm going to talk a little bit later. Average age is 80, our oldest is 105. There's a statistic that we've been following. I've been with SelfHelp 20 years. I started as a social worker. So I can vouch for that in 20 years, less than 2% of older adults from our housing have to move to a higher level of care. And that's a statistics that we've been kind of, and then we did research and we found there's a white paper that I can share later on. But we know that our folks are living independently in our housing because of the secret sauce, which is the social workers, right? I always like to say I'm a social worker. We are the people who keep folks in our housing, active and engaged because we kind of cater to their needs depending on what their needs are, again, with the trauma-informed lens. So SelfHelp Active Service for Aging model has two goals. We like to keep people stably housed, and through our different programs and activities, we combat social isolation. And that's something that, again, has an impact on their overall well-being. There's on-site social workers in our buildings, and they provide a wide range of services. We onboard them when they move into the building. We connect them to the different resources and services. We work collaboratively with other partners to bring in services that we might not be able to provide on-site. And we have best practices, which kind of is this 8 dimensions of wellness that we bring into our program. We want to make sure that they are physically well, spiritually well, intellectually well, financially well. And our programs and services kind of cover all these different dimensions of wellness. So what are some of the services and practices that, again, we only provide services to older adults. So historically, we have come up with these, kind of broad stroke things that we feel help people in successful aging. There used to be a concept of aging in place, then it became aging in pace, and now we believe in aging in the community. We want to keep people in the community with the right supports, right? So the communication, and there needs to be communication, and these are some of the trauma-informed principles like safety, trust, communication, empowerment, giving people voices and choices, right? And really understanding their cultural background to help them age with independence and dignity. So, we are their trusted partners, and we all know that trust doesn't happen overnight. So the first interaction that you have with someone as they move in, that's what's going to help build that trust. So we become their trusted advisors, so that when crisis comes, then they kind of know who to reach out to. And especially with older adults who are coming from unhoused situations, many don't have anybody, right? So social services, social workers, the team becomes their trusted partners. Engagement needs to be intentional because, again, trauma, is manifested in people being resistant, people being not willing to engage, people isolating themselves, right? So the engagement needs to be intentional. It doesn't have to be like someone breathing through your, down your neck, but consistent, support, informing folks, understanding their pace. The first week that people move in, we don't do a big party. because we know people are coming from from different experiences, but we want to do one-on-one and then invite them for maybe like a coffee hour or a tea hour or whatever that they want with snacks, so that then they can gradually come in and start meeting other people in the affordable housing, because our model integrates formerly unhoused older adults into affordable housing. So our entire building is not from unhoused situations, it's a mix. So we kind of build and integrate folks. Of course, the services have to be what they want in the language that they speak, and understanding their backgrounds. Social determinants of health is very important. We all know that when you look at an overall well-being of an individual, 20% of impacts come from clinical setting, right? The doctor's office, the hospital, the urgent care. 80% of impacts come from the non-clinical side, which are the social determinants of health, right? Whether they have access to all the benefits and entitlements, or are they economically stable? Are they socially connected? Do they have access to the right kind of medical needs that they have? Community building, right? Engagement, all that is very important. And we do that by all different programs and activities that our social workers are able to do for the older adults. Role of technology, we cannot, COVID was a great example of how technology helped people be connected, right? So the role of technology in whatever shape and form that they would like, whether it is teaching them how to use a smartphone, to then getting them on Skype, to then getting them on Teams, to then getting them on Zoom, whatever their pace is, but letting them get used to technology, whether it's using, iPads or laptops or computers, internet awareness, right? Banking, some people want to do that, automatic payments, right? Whatever that pace might be, but the technology plays a vital role in, again, impacting the physical, the financial well-being of older adults. Collaborations, none of us can do this alone, right? So we need partners. We have to be strategic about our partners. What are some of the things that we can bring on which we might not be able to provide with collaboration, right? And then it also brings them, I always, joke with my, different partners, is that they get so sick and tired of looking at us all the time that they welcome when there is someone else coming in, right? So we need partners, whether it is working with nursing schools for nursing students, occupational therapy students, bringing in social work interns, whatever the interdisciplinary kind of programming and activities we can bring in, it helps, right? So then they kind of see, oh, I don't just have one social worker. These are all my different partners, and they're all looking for me. So in a sense, we are building their social network, which many folks don't have, without them knowing, but that's our intention, right? And that's how they kind of, okay, there are four or five different people checking on me for something, right? Sometimes they get really hassled with that. Sometimes they really welcome that, right? That person didn't call me this week. What happened, right? So they also check on us just the way we check on them. And then, I want to talk a little bit about, how we can come up with trauma-informed emergency preparedness, right? So that's the aspect that I really wanted to kind of talk about, but I wanted to kind of give a little background as to how we came to this. So we all know about advance directives, right? Advance directives are legal documents that allow individuals to express their, wishes regarding their medical treatment and healthcare decisions, just in case they are no longer able to communicate those wishes, right? But these are serious kind of conversations. You can't just have that conversation on the first day and say, okay, let's talk about DNR, let's talk about, healthcare proxy, do you want to make living will, right? So how can we create this kind of emergency preparedness in a trauma-informed way, right? So it has to start from day one, but we have to maintain their pace. We have to introduce concepts, but we have to kind of do it at their pace, right? So what are some of we call it plan now so that you can live, confidently. So help us help you today so that then we don't bother you tomorrow, right? We don't say it like that, but that's the way we kind of, sometimes that's the hook for us to say, We will not bother you. If you work with us today, then tomorrow we are not going to kind of, come back to you. So how do we build that relationship? And we build that relationship by first really creating like a safe environment, right? So ensuring that these conversations are happening in privacy of office. Sometimes we even do that in their apartments, because maybe they have that comfortable blanket that they want to use, or they have a stuffed toy, or they might have a favorite chair. Whatever makes them feel safe for us to have this not so very safe or difficult. It's a difficult conversation, right? So we really do. We start with that, building trust and respect, right? That's very important for us to have that consistent relationship. So if you have an assigned social worker, try to have that social worker be the person to have all kinds of conversations. Of course, we understand people go on vacation, we have coverage, but they see the team, right? So it's same people. It's not like suddenly we're bringing in a brand new person to have a very, very difficult conversation. We might introduce them in our conversation and bring a third person into the conversation, but it's the social workers who are building that trust and, rapport with our older adults. And of course, respect is very important. That's also a trauma-informed principle, right? For their experiences, their values, what their belief systems are. Many Asian folks don't want to talk about advance directives because they think if they talk about it, they're bringing bad omen into it, right? So you have to be careful about that. You need to understand what the cultural context is. Then, of course, you have to be trauma-informed, right? That's very important, being aware of their situations. And for many people, it's very, what's the question that we usually ask when we are doing preparedness? Who can you fall back on? Many people don't have anybody to fall back on. So we also have to modulate and change the questions and the way we ask or pose that question to older adults, right? Especially the ones who are coming with such traumatic experiences. And using a language which is easy to understand. No jargons. And definitely no acronyms, right? So we have to talk in a way that they understand. And explain to them, if they have someone in their life, a family member or, a family member who might not be very active in their life, yet they have, someone or their chosen family, whatever the situation might be, having that conversation that, you are going to help them by not giving them the stress. You don't want to stress them. So why don't we together come up with your wishes while you can, right? And this way you will make sure that they are doing exactly what you want. And we are also not burdening them, because you really don't want to burden your family members if they have, or anybody who's in their lives, right? Again, taking us a person-centric approach, right? Individual needs, no one size fit all, right? Tailor the needs to the person that we are talking to. And also remember the holistic approach, right? Those 8 dimensions of wellness, make sure we are looking at person as a whole, right? When we are coming and having these important conversations. Empower and validate, right? Again, trauma principles, choice and control. Emphasize individual control over their decisions and validate their feelings and choices, right? Informed decision making provides all the necessary info in a way that we can offer them, but again, we work with them on their pace, right? They shouldn't feel rushed because we have to do a check mark in our things that we needed to do. We have to kind of pace it with them. And again, using clear and compassionate communication, right? We are all trauma informed, so we need to have that compassion in our conversation. Active listening, let them talk, and show empathy, right? And acknowledge if they have emotions or concerns. We cannot invalidate what they're feeling. If they're not ready, then they're not ready. And also, like we call it gentle questioning, asking open-ended questions, gently facilitating conversations, and asking them, what are your thoughts about this? What do you think? What do you want to do, right? Give them that control. Of course, provide support and resources, whatever resources that we can provide for them, whether it's in the shape of a pamphlet, whether it's in the shape of a flyer. Some of them are, very, tech savvy. We can show them on websites. They can take a look at it. We can send them the links if that's needed. We can provide them with all the support and information, but they are the ones who are going to be making those decisions. It's on their timeline. But we also have to kind of nudge them. We can't leave it on them, but we also have to kind of nudge them a little bit. But, again, pacing ourselves, right, in that process. And bringing conversations gradually, right? Small steps, break down bigger concepts into smaller things like, bite-sized information. Have multiple sessions if need be. You don't have to do it in one session. You can do it, and then you can maybe offer cookies in some sessions, ask them about their favorite movies in some sessions, and then kind of bring in, whatever that might be, but, be consistent. Don't give up, and, don't lose sight of the fact that we do have to eventually do a check mark in that we have done it, but, gradually, baby steps, right? Follow up and, kind of discuss and allow, we had that conversation. What do you think? Did you get a chance to discuss it with, if they have someone to discuss it with? Or did you give it a thought? Did you read that pamphlet that we gave you, right? So follow-up is important. Again, respect their pace, no pressure. Give them time. Older adults need time to think. Give them that, honor those decisions and be patient, right? We all know, when we are rushed, right? We kind of go into our defense mechanism, right? We resist. We don't want to talk about it. It's overwhelming. We can't even think. We're just frozen, right? So that's overwhelming information. And for many, this is the first time someone has asked them, what are your wishes? So also keep that in mind, that can in itself can create feelings that they have never felt before, or it's overwhelming. So, make sure you are aware of those. Documentation and review. Once they sign, if you really get to the end of the whole process, and if they actually sign a healthcare proxy, or they create something, then make sure you document and give them a copy. And also let others who, if they have appointed a healthcare proxy, let the other person know that you've been appointed a healthcare proxy, and everybody's on the same page about, again, what those questions and, what those decisions are. And then periodically review it. Not every week, pace it. But when you do your 6-monthly assessment, or a 12-month assessment, or 2-year assessment, whatever the timeline would be, just make sure that you review it so that, are you still appointing this person? Are you still in touch with this person? Do you still have a good relationship with this person? Whatever might be, just make sure you review. And then definitely make sure you recognize and support the emotional reaction, right? Be prepared to provide, and if need be ready to have referrals, right, where you can refer to people. It shouldn't come as a surprise that someone might get triggered with this, right? That's our role in here. And also have a crisis plan, right? Just in case if something really goes sideways, what is your plan of action? And then last but not the least, professional training, right? That's what we all need for our social workers, training of the providers, making sure staff is trained in trauma-informed care and communication, and then, a lot of continuing education, even if you have onboarded a staff person, they've gone through the training process, but, there might be something new, and always be on the lookout. Come to conferences, network with other entities to learn what the best practices are. And again, with adhering to all these different things, we will be able to make sure that, we are having these difficult conversations in a trauma-informed manner. So there were some toolkits that I had mentioned, we created a homelessness integration toolkit. We had a study where we were able to demonstrate that folks who live in our buildings, are less costly to the healthcare system, like social determinants of health. And then we also have a facilitator's guide that we were able to create with the generous grant that we received from Fan Fox, Leslie and Samuel's Foundation, where we are having listening sessions, where we can have mental health conversations, emotional resilience conversations with older adults. So if you click on that bar, then you can email us, and then we can send you those toolkits, or share with you where we can find the toolkits.
Thanks so much, Mohini. One thing that you mentioned when you were speaking that stuck out in my mind was talking about really intentionally building a social network for the folks that you're serving. I was part of a focus group recently, and I asked, what is the hardest, demographic or population or client to serve? And one of the first responses that came back was the people who are totally isolated and have no support networks, which was not the answer I was expecting, right? But makes sense in hearing that they feel like they're not worth the intervention, or they're somehow not worthy of services. And I think that propensity for isolation is so much higher with the older adults. So thanks for that. All right, and last but not least, we'll hear from John Betts and Breaking Ground on their aging services team and cluster care program.
Thanks so much. Just in the interest of time, and I very much agree with everything you all said, and I had many of the same points. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to pick up on that social network idea, because I think this is a really interesting panel, because we've sort of both of you focus largely sort of on like individual level interventions, and a lot of what our aging services team does and focuses on is really milieu based and really building community and supporting community in our buildings. So Breaking Ground, we have a continuum of care for folks who are currently experiencing homelessness on the street, all the way through folks who are permanently housed in our permanent supportive and affordable housing buildings. And so it's also interesting because we have sort of several generations of sort of aging services on this stage, right? Breaking Ground is sort of the new kid on the block to dedicating resources and specific staff to this. We have always provided auxiliary support services to our tenants and clients, and really feel like that building of community in order to help reduce isolation and help support folks in taking ownership and feeling a sense of ownership in the building is really the key to longevity and long tenancy. And so aging services really started in earnest for us, again, thanks to the Samuels Foundation in 2019. Breaking Ground's oldest building, our Times Square building, which is the largest supportive housing residence in the country, has over 600 units. It opened over 30 years ago, and some of the tenants who are there are still original tenants. And so in a building that large, it became very clear over time, as people were continuing to age in place or age in the community, that there was a need for additional support. And so we started exploring what this would look like in earnest in 2019 under the leadership of Wale Adekbenle, who sort of helped start and bring to fruition our aging services team. And that was really focused on the more individualized auxiliary case management, specifically for folks with aging-related needs. So I was just talking before the panel that so much of the sort of older adult social services landscape is so complicated, so time and labor intensive, that we really are, and we're still trying to find a balance, and Rebecca and I were just sort of talking about this, about how do you work toward the same goal without stepping on each other's toes and without sort of requiring everyone to know everything, right? Because so much of it is so complicated. Just the simple need to get someone home care, the amount of time and effort and sort of circles and backtracks and chutes and ladders that you have to play in order to get a person home care is a task in and of itself. And so we are attempting to strike a balance between this individualized sort of step in, step out way of providing case consultation and support. We recently brought our aging services team under a larger umbrella of our tenant services team, which is our broader team that provides milieu-based community support services across our buildings. So those are the folks who are providing, running events, running groups, and I'm going to talk here in a minute about the sort of importance of that to creating an environment. But what we're really trying to do is support people in remaining long-term in the building, and one of the ways we feel best that we're able to do that is by helping people build community and develop a sense of support in the building. So I just wanted to sort of highlight the fact that it's not just the individual work, it's also the sort of community work that has to happen in the buildings. So our aging services team, like I mentioned, is a specialized social services team that's part of our larger tenant services umbrella. And because we do a continuum of services from folks experiencing homelessness to folks who are permanently housed, we're sort of catching people earlier in their progression of moving into permanent housing. And so we also came to realize that there was a need, even before people were getting into permanent housing, that we could start to address some of these issues that were inevitably going to crop up in permanent housing sooner. And so we have about 600 beds of transitional safe haven housing, and this about a year and a half ago, with the support of the Samuels Foundation, we started a cluster care pilot at one of our safe havens that's since expanded to 2. And so the idea of cluster care is that it is geographically cohorted care. So the traditional home health aid model is I get 4 hours of home care a day, my person comes and sees me for those 4 hours, that person leaves after 4 hours. If I have an issue outside those 4 hours, I have to wait until the next day that they come, right? And so the idea of cluster care is if you have a large cohort of folks in a single geography, you can essentially pool time. So rather than someone receiving sort of 4 hours of time continuously, if you have 10 to 15, 20 people, you can have a couple staff that are bouncing around and spending 15 minutes here with this person to help them get in the shower for the day, spending 15 minutes with this person, helping them clean up their room, et cetera, et cetera. And so we are piloting that in our Andrews Safe Haven and in our Seafarers Safe Haven, and we're currently exploring occupational therapy as well, which we see as sort of an outgrowth of this that would work most likely better in our permanent housing than it does in our transitional housing, but very much focused on the same issues of supporting people in remaining for as long as possible in the community. Our cluster care pilot at the Andrews Safe Haven, it's a small pilot. We've served about 40 people to date, and the preliminary data suggests that we've seen a 60% decrease in EMS calls related to folks who were going to the hospital because they were largely going to the hospital for ADL-related needs, that there was no sort of additional staff need or staff capacity to spend the time and effort, because what you really need is time, right? That's the issue that you really need, is someone who can spend an hour with someone, helping them clean up their room or coaching them from outside the bathroom on, okay, now you're going to use the Lice shampoo and I'm going to remind you to use the Lice shampoo, right? So it's very time intensive, but it's not actually that staff intensive. This is a 2-person program, and we've had those kinds of results. So we see it as very promising and are looking to expand it perhaps more formally in the realm of occupational therapy in our supportive housing. And occupational therapy can be done obviously both individually, but then there are group interventions that you can do with occupational therapy as well. So I did want to pick up as well on what maybe both of you said about the transition to a higher level of care, right? And the fact that many of our folks have experienced trauma and abandonment in many ways. They've been abandoned by systems, perhaps abandoned by family. And we do have folks, you know, we are not a nursing setting. We do have folks who move into higher levels of care. And I think one of the things that's most powerful about having an aging services team or a community at the site is that rather than it just being a sort of, okay, now you can't come back because it's not safe for you to come back, you're in a nursing home now, bye, right? To your point about having conversations early, often, but at their pace, right? Being able to support folks in that transition rather than sort of dump them into a nursing home and forget about them, right? Those are often big transitions that folks don't want to have those conversations. And so being able to do that in a way that preserves the person's dignity and allows them to maintain a sense of autonomy in making those kinds of choices can be really powerful. And it's also helped us through advanced directives, again, a very delicate conversation that needs to be had early and often. We have seen some decrease in the amount of time that units are offline when someone passes away in the unit, because as I'm sure you're all aware, if someone passes away in the unit with no sort of clear advance directive, the unit gets sealed and it can be off, you have to go to surrogate court and it can be offline for months and months and months, which is just holding up someone else getting into the unit. So I did just want to highlight specifically and pick up on some of the takeaways that you all have mentioned, but just to reiterate them, I think one of the things that we've seen is that consistency is really key for folks. Wale and his team over the past 2 years have held nearly 1,400 events across our 15 buildings with an average attendance of 18 and an average 55 plus attendance of over 13. Now, that average skews high because it also includes things like Thanksgiving meals and sort of the big splashy events. But I think that number of events also speaks to the fact that when you're getting people together and building a community, that consistency is just as important if there's only 1 or 2 people that show up for the weekly coffee hour, because that may be their sort of place to connect with staff and have a place to feel cared about and supported. So I think that consistency is really key. Lauren, you talked about the fact that folks who've experienced homelessness or experienced trauma tend to age differently and sooner than folks who are quote unquote general population. Folks who have experienced homelessness also die much sooner than folks who have not experienced homelessness. One of the most striking statistics that I've seen recently is that folks who have experienced homelessness today die at the same average age of folks in the general population did in 1900. And so folks are passing away when they're sort of just becoming seniors, right? 55, 60, for many folks who have experienced homelessness and have moved into housing that can be old for some folks. And so they have many of the conditions that folks who are much older are experiencing. Providing diverse opportunities and pathways for engagement. We run groups on everything from financial literacy to healthy eating. We did cooking groups. We have a partnership with Theater of the Oppressed New York City that comes in and does drama groups for folks. We have arts and crafts groups. There is what I understand is a very popular Sing and Shake It Up group that's like a singing and sort of dancing movement group that's very popular. So I think giving folks the opportunity to build a community in the way that they feel most connected to can really help support folks in remaining in the buildings long term. Our average length of tenancy for our older adults across our buildings is over 9 years. And that includes some of our newer buildings that haven't even been open that long. So connecting people to their community and creating an environment in which people feel safe and feel a sense of ownership is really vitally important. We talked about having difficult conversations early and often, and then I think not to be sort of cocky about it, but like not underestimating your own importance, right? Like staff, this is really hard work that staff are doing, but they're also developing really meaningful relationships with the folks that they're working with. And so this also goes back to the idea of consistency and to trauma-informed care, right? Showing up when and where you say you're going to show up keeping your word no matter what that word is, not making promises that you can't keep. That sort of persistence and persistence can be really valuable to folks. And then just, I think it's very important, and I want to thank the work that CSH has been doing around this. I think it's really important for us all as service providers to understand just the sort of magnitude of what we're dealing with. Some of you may have seen these graphics before. This is the graphic depiction of the overall aging of the population of people experiencing homelessness. Wow, these P's are like really going on this mic, sorry. So the left is the national graph and the right is New York City. And we are this was a 2017 to 2030, I believe. So we're about halfway through this graph. And there are a lot more folks that are going to be aging in place, aging in the community. Older folks who are experiencing homelessness as rent burden continues to increase. There have been some stories some sort of like human interest stories even on like national news about the fact that older folks are starting to be evicted from their homes at sort of increasing rates. And so I think it's really important that we as service providers recognize what's coming and use our collective voices to do what we can to create the kind of services and supports that we're talking about here.
Thank you so much. I neglected to mention at the top of our conversation that actually everybody up here represents an organization that worked with us and when we did the cohort on aging services. So we've been doing this work together for a minute now. Alrighty. So I'm going to pull my questions up. Want to open it up to questions from the audience for sure. And yeah, you're great. I was going to say, if you all can find your way to a microphone, please, so that everybody can kind of hear the questions. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noah Shaheen. I'm the program director for supporting housing at Lenox Hill Neighborhood House. So I have a question for everyone here. So first of all, I want to start with hoarding and cluttering. I have a lot of clients in my building who really, their hoarding and their cluttering really affects the building because they are hoarding things like dirty things that like infest the building and infest the room. And I try like several times, like me, myself, not just like the case manager or the clinical coordinator, to go upstairs, have a conversation with client, tell them that this is affecting other roommates in the quad, as well. And I will try like to work with them, like meet with them, like let's bring the building manager, let's take the things together. And they will give, like the client will give me her word or he will give me his words and his promises. And then I will go the next day and the client will be like, no, I never said so. And I just wonder how we can like help, because even if I refer the client to APS, realistically speaking, I'm so sorry, APS doesn't do anything. So and I do understand that they are attached to certain things, but there are also other roommates that are affected by that. And me, myself, I'm affected by that because the entire building is infested. So like, I want to hear your perspective. Also for the bridge, like what is the process? Does the client need to accept working with you, or like me, myself as an organization, would I be able just to refer the client and you guys will try to build that relationship per se?
So thank you so much for the question, just because this is perfect. So unfortunately, right now, the home program is only available with bridge residential tenants. But I will say, because that I think is the biggest issue that I encounter, is that I feel very badly for staff that are working in these buildings, sometimes 8-hour shifts, and we have vents in every building, so you're breathing everything in. There's no way that you aren't. I think one of the real responses to that, like in real time, that can be done, my suggestion, because APS, unfortunately, doesn't get anything done in this department, is to come up with a plan with staff and your maintenance department, and also to focus on safety hazards with the tenants, right? Because you can't really convince someone to do something they don't want to do, but you can convince someone to not hurt themselves because you're to eliminate some level of risk in some aspects. So I think when I hit a hard spot, that's what I focus on, is the safety hazards, and I find a way in through there. And it's a team effort. You definitely got to elicit some assistance from your staff and your maintenance department.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is it the same thing for the bridge, where also you only assist clients who are in the bridge, like for the cluster care?
For Breaking Ground?
Yeah.
Yes. So our cluster care program is at 2 of our transitional housing residences. But what I would say, sort of adding on to what Yuliel had mentioned, is that the biggest lesson that we have learned from cluster care is that it's not going to be something that you're going to be able to knock on the person's door and say, I'm going to come back tomorrow and this better be cleaned up, right? I think you can't underestimate the amount of time and sort of like emotional connection or sort of rapport, to use a more clinical term, that you're going to have to build with the person. And all it takes is sort of one in. That's what I'll say, right? All it takes is one in, right? If you can get the person one day to discard one thing, right? Or say that they actually don't need the thing that they just tried to bring into the building. They haven't even sort of incorporated it into their room yet, and they agreed to get rid of it. You can build on those sort of small victories to move forward. And I also think that it's important to recognize, to the point that Lauren made about this bag of the candy wrappers from the first Halloween that this person got their child back, it's not always, the sort of connection between what you're seeing is not always clear. There was a client in cluster care who had not showered for months and months and months on end, and it took months and months and months for staff to find out why he was not showering. And it turns out that he had a history of sexual trauma and was very afraid that while he was in the shower, someone was going to come in and assault him. And so all it took then was the staff member standing outside the bathroom and essentially guarding the bathroom while he was in the shower to get him to shower after months and months and months, right? But that is not something, had we tried to go in and sort of say, you're going to shower today or there's going to be an issue, we would have set ourselves back rather than forward.
Sorry, I just want to add on to what John is saying, just because it's important to know also that before anyone that's actually struggling with hoarding, it's been studied. It takes about 7 to 9 attempts before you can even get in the room. So I think a big thing is patience and rapport building.
Okay. Just the last 2 things. I want to know if you know of any organizations that will be able to come, because like we're like literally only 2 staff, like plus the maintenance or the property manager staff. Would you recommend any organization where they will be able to talk about hoarding or ADL scales, and I can connect with them to come either maybe during the community meeting, talk to individual clients, even if it's not like one-on-one, but just like for our clients to be exposed to like different knowledge and maybe people who are more aware of like these conditions in a clinical level?
And so right now we actually don't have a resource available, but I do believe that this is why we are here today, right? To come together and try to create a resource that you can use, we can all use, and clients would benefit greatly from. So thank you so much for that question, right? Because now we see there's a need. There's a need.
Thank you.
Thanks. Before we go to the next question, I since we're on the hoarding tip here, I was just curious, what are some of the additional risks that present when somebody is dealing with hoarding as an older adult or as they age versus somebody who's maybe younger, more mobile?
So mobility, I think, is the biggest thing. We see a lot of older adults that sometimes it is dangerous to be in these homes with 16, 18, 26 boxes, and you also now maybe have a walker or a cane. So I think the biggest difference is in mobility and in just someone being fully body abled and able to move through their unit. One of the biggest things that I focus on is clearing spaces and making sure doors and windows can be opened in a comfortable way. I think with younger individuals, I have met some younger individuals at the bridge that are struggling with hoarding, but I think it's more interesting with them because they have more energy. They're very clear in telling you, no, I don't need any assistance in this department. So I think also with older adults, it helps us in that sense that we're able, to a certain level, they understand they're going to need help with a box at one point. So I think that's the biggest difference now. I don't know.
Yeah, just going back to also what someone said about, or what the question was about, it's affecting the whole building. The other thing in our cluster care program, and it's a little different because it's transitional housing, so folks don't have completely their own units, but I would imagine that the same would hold true in permanent housing, is the community has picked up on the fact that things are getting better, right? And so this sort of, you talked about avoidance and sort of social isolation, like the folks who had been struggling with ADLs and are now showering are not experiencing the same kind of like social isolation and like move to the other side of the hall, oh, that person stinks. And it's sort of creating it's improving the overall milieu in a way that you may also be able to sort of draw on folks' desire to perhaps connect with others as a way to sort of like guide people to the fact that, well, one of the reasons folks may not be interacting with you as much is because would you like to have people come over to your apartment? Like, let's, make it so that people can do that. That may also be an in for folks. But just in terms of hazards, I think also spoiled food and like concerns with vision and the fact that folks may not sort of be able to read an expiration date and may still continue to hoard stuff in their refrigerator is a real concern as well.
Okay, thank you for your patience.
Yes, thank you. My name is Camille Sang-Armstrong. I'm with ACMH. I'm a program director for the Anna's House program. And currently we house, in that particular location, we house 60 clients. The issue I'm having is that most of our population is actually aging in place, right? So I think maybe of the number of clients that we have, over 75% of these clients are 60 years and older. Just to give a suggestion before I ask my question, with regards to the hoarding situation, I think that the cohort right there, you all have suggestions, so you could put like a PowerPoint presentation together to see how all of you are already addressing this situation and pass on that PowerPoint suggestion to the different programs. And then we can now use it as a framework and make it a lot more unique to the programs that we have. All right, moving on. So
I love that. That was great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So my question is this, because I've come to the realization that we have so many clients who are aging in place, hence come additional medical issues, mobility issues, and we now have to look for resources as far as home health aides are concerned. Older individuals are quite stubborn. I understand the presentations that were made and having the conversation, building a rapport, building a relationship, connecting them to services, so on and so forth. But what I'm realizing is that now our housing is becoming nursing homes because these individuals refuse, no matter how staff works with these individuals, they refuse to move, right? And our permanent housing locations are not nursing homes, but they're turning into nursing homes. So my question is / challenge, how do we get these individuals to buy into the mere fact that you're not residing in a nursing home and you need a higher level of care, 24-hour services? How do we convince them? I understand they have rights. I understand that we work within parameters from a legal frame point, but how do we get them out? Because I have been called the Grim Reaper, because these individuals are dying in place. So how do we, what argument now can we add to the presentations that were given to encourage these individuals, motivate these individuals to move to a higher level of care so that they don't die in place or they have to have hospital beds put in place for them?
I think I understand the concern, though. If you're not equipped to offer these, higher level of care services, then how do you broach that conversation? And so, John, you.
I understand what also she's saying. I have a client right now, she's really decompensating, right? And the other day I had to go out to she was really decompensating. She doesn't have any family member, and she was hospitalized like 2 weeks ago, and now she's back because the hospital did not offer like a nursing home. And now, two days ago, I needed to walk the street because her roommate called me and she said, the client doesn't know where's the building. She doesn't know where's the building. So I walked out of the building, brought the client back. All her like arms were like pitch black, and I was like, what happened? And she couldn't remember, and it's now, I understand, like, she preferred to be there. She had been there for 20 years. I completely understand that she wants to remain there until the last day, but really we're not equipped. Like I said, we're only 2 staff member plus the building manager. So, and I was really like thinking about her when I went back home, like what is she doing? What if she goes in the middle of the night? What can I do? So like, yeah, maybe we have additional services, or how we really can assist. Like I want just like an idea, a plan, a thing that is in place that I can help. Was there that them remaining in their supporting housing? What can we offer to make it like a safe place? Or, as her point, like should they go to nursing homes? Like,
yeah, I think I have a couple of thoughts on this. I think the first is that it's great to hear from everyone. It's clear that everyone in this room cares about the folks that they are working with, right? And unfortunately, it's not just supportive housing. The systems in general that, unless you are independently wealthy and can afford to pay thousands and thousands of dollars a month for someone to live in a posh nursing home with the pool and all of those things, right? Our systems as a whole are not set up to support folks aging in the community, let alone in supportive housing, right? So there are folks, it's not just folks in supportive housing who are wandering away from their housing and don't know how to get back. I get, alerts on my phone of like silver alerts of folks who have wandered away, right? So I just want to sort of reframe the idea that it's supportive housing alone that's dealing with this. And I think that this gets to the bigger issue, which I think one of the things that is unique about supportive housing and provides folks an opportunity for dignity is that there has the potential to be a community that cares when the person passes away, right? And cares that the person died with dignity. We talk a lot about the folks that we work with who move through our continuum of care from homelessness. It's very difficult when folks die. Often we've been working with them for years and years, but at least they died in housing rather than on the street, right? And so I think one of the things that we can do, hearing all of the passion in this room, is to continue to support the kind of work that CSH is doing around making this known and making the fact that this is an issue that we need more support for staff. We need more support for training, for retaining folks in these social services positions that are really, really hard long term, right? Workforce development in ways that sort of support people to develop the expertise to work with this very challenging population, because folks are not doing this for the money. There are a lot of other places where you could go to a hospital or to a nursing home and probably be making just as much, if not more. And so I just want to reframe the question of the issue being that people are dying in place, to the fact that folks have a right to die with dignity, and that we as a sector should be doing what we can to make that a reality for the folks that we serve.
Thanks.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation and panel. I am with the Jewish Board. My name is Luke, and one of the concerns that our housing staff run into a lot, which I didn't hear mentioned a lot during the presentation, is related to the kind of dual decline in cognition and memory that a lot of our clients experience as they age. And not only does it make it more difficult for them to make and keep appointments, but in terms of service provision, it often happens that it's more difficult for them to remember previous conversations, previous interventions, the status of their support plans, and they're working with the staff. We do have one healthy aging social worker across our 1,200 beds in supportive housing. So there's a lot of clients who are experiencing this issue and not a lot of help to go around, and the caseworkers sometimes feel ill-equipped to deal with memory and cognition in general. So I'm just kind of wondering what kind of resources there are, possible interventions or best practices and approaches that you guys have found helpful in that specific area.
So in the home program, we actually, because it is a very real issue, we use a measure called the ticks, and this is what we're using just to gauge levels of, cognition. And we, depending on what you score on the ticks, unfortunately, depending on what it is that you get, we may or may not be able to work with you, but we try to. I think one of the bigger things that the home program has done, because I have personally encountered it repeatedly, where cancel sessions and clients can't remember, sometimes even my face. And I think the big thing is trying to come up with more outreach attempts. At least for our program, it was a lot of trying to stay in contact with them as often as possible. I would also come up with little things with my clients just to kind of, how like when we would try to remember information and you try to associate it with an image or something, that's how I try to counter it. But I do hear what you're saying, because sometimes at least for me, I don't know how you guys approach it, but sometimes I do feel a little ill-equipped where I can't help you remember certain, it does become a little bit difficult. But we try to continue to work the problem and come up with different ways to be remembered, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm from the Catskills. We don't have as many resources as y'all have down here in the city, but we have one client that is a special case. So he's in our supported housing program because he came from being chronically homeless. He doesn't have an SMI. In fact, he has full cognitive ability. Great guy. However, he has a really bad wound. So he goes into rehab for 90 days, and then he leaves AMA every 90 days because he doesn't want to lose his Social Security benefits. He comes home. The aid service won't help him anymore because he needs round-the-clock care. So therefore, they won't give him a home health aid anymore. And he'll end up within a day or two back in the ER, and then end up back in rehab for another 90 days until he comes home. This has been going on for over 2 years. We honestly don't know what to do anymore. Like, we know he wants to be at home. We've tried to set him up with other options. We've tried to set him up. He has a son across the country in Texas. We actually found him a higher level of care down there that he could go to be closer to his son. He doesn't want to do that. We've tried him all kinds of things. We've had him tour different communities that he could be a part of, higher level of care locally, and nothing is working. I don't know if you have any advice, but every 90 days he just comes home.
This is not going to answer your question, but it is something that I want to sort of challenge all of us to think about, which is people have the right to make what we think are bad decisions, right? And that's always just something that I think about as well, of like, maybe he's okay with this rhythm of I go for 90 days, it doesn't heal, I come back, I'm here for 2 days, and then I go back. I don't know, but I just want to sort of put that out there for folks as well, that folks do have the right to fail, and to fail with dignity. And I think that is one thing that supportive housing can do, is be there for folks when they do make those decisions.
I want to ask a quick question. Are you guys going to share this information? Because I would like some acronyms for my agency. I'm saying, like, she mentioned it. You guys didn't reciprocate. Are you going to send this information to us?
I actually don't know how the information gets, if the slides will be available.
But we do have business cards available,
Yes.
and I will be here if anyone wants to connect with me. Yeah.
Yes. And I think I think we maybe have one more question. We're at time, but go ahead.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you for all the information. Just picking back on cases where clients go to rehab, come back. I know that there was like 5% of clients that have been granted 24-hour care. Now, the conversations with Medicaid to increase the hours is terrible. I have a client who has been going back and forth with subacute rehab. The last time that he came back, he fell an entire flight of stairs. I have been working with Medicaid and fighting with them just to increase his hours to 8 hours per day, 7 days a week. Now, we do have cluster care in the building as well. Has there been any conversation with Medicaid? Because they don't seem to understand that supportive housing is not helping them with their ADLs, it's mostly with case management. So I'm just wondering, in that federal program, is there a conversation even being started? Because they don't understand what we're doing, they don't understand that we're not their direct, their healthcare proxies, but at the same time, we are their advocate. And what we're trying to help them stay in place, we come across as us trying to make decisions for them, and we're the bad people.
Yeah. Does anybody want to take that one?
I mean, I would say that, again, like this forum, this platform is, again, a reminder that we are all advocates. And if we collectively, keep pushing the envelope, things will change. Things are changing, right? So I think as a collective, we should advocate, and different agencies bringing all these issues, because none of what we are talking today is not new for any one of us. But again, patience and time and consistency, we have to keep on pushing the agenda and keep on making, our, hopes and desires known with an effective, have research backup. There's cost saving here, this is how we should do it. this is what the impact is going to be. So again, like, we hear your frustration. We are also frustrated, but I think as long as we continue advocating and, not giving up, but having clients' best interest in mind, safety and self-determination, right? A balancing act, but again, pushing the agenda to the right entities. So have your agency, be part of collaboratives, be part of advocacy. So that would be my.
Thank you.
And just concretely, you may want to check out NILAG Legal Health. If you haven't already reached out to them, they may be interested in that.
Nightlight?
NILAG, New York Legal Assistance Group. They have a
Okay.
legal health division.
Thank you.
All right, we are at time. Let's have another hand for our amazing panel. And thank you all for joining us for the conversation today.